Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore a concept that gently unravels the very fabric of our everyday reality, peeling back the layers of the physical world to reveal a profound and mesmerizing truth. We are going to journey into the microscopic, into the intangible, to understand the true scale of a photon, a particle with no size. As you settle into the quiet of your room, let go of the heavy, solid world around you and allow your mind to drift into a space where the rules of common sense slowly dissolve into the deep, dark, and beautiful wonders of quantum mechanics. From the very first moments of our lives, our brains are meticulously trained to understand the universe through the language of substance. We are physical creatures, bound by the relentless pull of gravity, wrapped in matter, and constantly interacting with a world that pushes back against us. When you reach out and pick up a smooth stone from the ground, you feel its weight pressing firmly into the palm of your hand. You can trace its jagged edges and smooth curves with your fingers. You can measure its circumference, and your mind immediately understands that this object occupies a highly specific, undeniable pocket of space. It has height, it has width, it has depth. If you were to place that stone into a glass of water, the water level must rise to accommodate it, because the fundamental rule of our everyday reality dictates that two things cannot occupy the exact same volume simultaneously. This is the foundational logic of our existence. We are deeply biologically conditioned to believe that for something to be real, for something to interact with the universe, it must claim physical territory. It must take up room. This assumption of substance is so deeply ingrained in our psychology that we instinctively project it onto everything we cannot directly see. We imagine the wind not as an invisible, formless force, but as a rushing river of tiny, colliding air molecules, each one a microscopic billiard ball taking up its own minuscule fraction of reality. We measure our lives in volumes, in distances, and in solid boundaries. It is a highly comforting, stable way to perceive the cosmos. It gives us a sense of grounding, a feeling that the universe is built of solid, reliable blocks that we can theoretically count, measure, and understand. But tonight, we must confront the fact that this comforting solidity is merely an illusion, a localized trick played on our macroscopic senses by a universe that is far stranger than we can comfortably imagine. Let us slowly begin to dismantle this illusion by shrinking our perspective, descending from the world of heavy objects into the hidden architecture of matter. Imagine peeling back the outer layers of reality, zooming past the smooth surface of that stone in your hand, past the crystalline structures of its ancient minerals, and down into the microscopic realm. Even here, the illusion of substance holds strong. We find grains of dust, microscopic bacteria, and the complex, sprawling architecture of biological cells. As we dive even deeper, crossing the threshold into the realm of the incredibly small, we reach the atomic level. For a long time, humanity pictured the atom as the ultimate, indivisible building block of nature, viewing it as a tiny, hard, impenetrable sphere. Even later, when science cracked the atom open to reveal the swirling, frantic storm of subatomic particles inside, we still desperately clung to our need for size. We measured the radius of the proton, we calculated the exact boundaries of the neutron, we mapped the probability clouds of the electrons spinning in the dark. Even at this unimaginable scale, where the rigid laws of classical physics begin to fray and warp into something bizarre, there is still a measurable, physical geometry. The proton might be incredibly, unfathomably small, measuring only about a femtometer across. But a femtometer is still a measurement. It is still a physical distance. It is a definitive boundary. It is a microscopic piece of the universe that the proton has successfully claimed as its own. You could, theoretically, place a proton next to a quantum ruler, and it would cover a definitive, measurable stretch of space. Our human intuition survives the journey down to the atomic nucleus because the nucleus, however small, still respects our biological need for volume. It still takes up space. But there is a threshold where this intuition violently and completely collapses, leaving our minds grasping at the empty air. It is a threshold we cross every single day without ever realizing the profound absurdity of what we are experiencing. This conceptual collapse happens when we try to understand the very phenomenon that allows us to perceive the solid world in the first place. It happens when we look at light. Light is the ultimate messenger of the cosmos. It carries the vital warmth of the sun across 93 million miles of freezing, desolate vacuum just to touch your skin. It brings the faint, ancient glow of distant, dying galaxies into the polished lenses of our telescopes. It bounces off the walls of your room, painting colors into your eyes and allowing you to navigate your surroundings. Because light interacts with the solid world so tangibly, because it can heat the ground, fade a piece of cloth, and cast a deep, sharp shadow on the pavement, our brains desperately try to force light into the same familiar category as the stone, the wind, and the proton. When we hear the word photon, which is the fundamental, indivisible unit of light, our minds immediately conjure up a comforting, physical image. We instinctively imagine a tiny, glowing marble. We picture a microscopic, luminous sphere zipping through the darkness of space, a tiny drop of pure energy encapsulated in a hard, spherical shell. We desperately try to give the photon a volume, a size, and a shape, because a universe filled with sizeless things feels deeply wrong, deeply unstable to a mind built entirely to navigate a solid, volumetric world. Yet, the cold, beautiful, and unforgiving mathematics of quantum mechanics absolutely refuses to accommodate our biological need for glowing marbles. The photon is not a tiny sphere. It is not a microscopic drop of luminous liquid. It is something far stranger, far more elusive, and far more beautiful than anything our everyday senses can comprehend. The photon is what physicists call a point particle. It is an entity that undeniably exists, that continuously interacts with our physical world, but which fundamentally, mathematically, occupies absolutely zero physical volume. This is not a metaphor. This is not a rounding error, a mathematical convenience, or a temporary limitation of our current measuring instruments. It is a fundamental, inescapable property of nature itself. If you were to somehow pause time and zoom in on a single frozen photon, magnifying your view by 1,000, then 1,000,000, then 1,000,000,000 times, you would never find a solid core. You would never find a hard edge where the photon begins and the vacuum of space ends. You could zoom in infinitely, falling forever into the center of the particle, and you would never encounter a physical boundary. It has no height, it has no width, it has no depth. It is a mathematical singularity, a localized ripple in the electromagnetic field that carries real energy, that carries real momentum, but absolutely refuses to claim a single cubic millimeter of physical territory in the void. Think deeply about the staggering implications of that reality as you lie in the quiet of the night. In the space around you, there are countless photons passing through the air, radiating from the distant stars and fading into the materials of your room. Each one of them is an absolute ghost. Each one is a completely dimensionless point of energy that can physically push against an atom, transfer heat, and alter the fundamental chemistry of the universe, all while taking up completely no space whatsoever. How can something with no size push against a solid object? How can an entity that has absolutely no physical geometry interact with our geometric world? It feels like a paradox, a glitch in the programming of the cosmos that challenges the very definition of what it means to exist. We are forced to realize that existence itself does not require volume. The universe is not a massive box completely filled with solid building blocks. The most fundamental interactions of reality, the forces that bind atoms together and illuminate the boundless dark of the cosmos, are entirely mediated by phantoms. When we finally accept the truth of the dimensionless photon, the solid world we hold so dear begins to feel incredibly fragile, almost dreamlike. The stone in your hand, the chair you sit on, the very planet revolving silently beneath you, all of these massive, imposing structures are ultimately held together by electromagnetic forces, by the constant, silent exchange of sizeless photons between microscopic particles. The architecture of reality is heavily dependent on entities that mathematically should not take up any room at all. The illusion of substance is just that a macroscopic hallucination generated by the complex interactions of invisible fields and dimensionless points of energy. You are drifting through a universe where the most common, the most visible, and the most vital particle in existence is entirely invisible to the concept of size. This realization does not need to bring existential fear. In fact, there is a profound, breathtaking tranquility in understanding that the universe is far less rigid and far less solid than we ever imagined. The heavy, burdensome solidity of the world is just a temporary state, a local phenomenon that your brain constructs for survival. At its deepest, most fundamental level, reality is not made of heavy, unbreakable spheres endlessly grinding against each other. It is made of weightless, sizeless points of potential, gracefully dancing in the dark. As you lie still, breathing slowly and deeply, you do not need to hold on to the weight of the physical world. Let the heavy thoughts of volume, mass, and rigid boundaries slip away into the night. You are surrounded by the gentle, invisible hum of the quantum realm, a place where things can exist beautifully and powerfully without ever needing to take up space. Allow your own mind to mirror the photon, weightless, dimensionless, and entirely free from the heavy constraints of the solid world, drifting peacefully into the mysteries of the light. To understand the true, chilling nature of a dimensionless entity, we must first confront our deep biological bias toward physical boundaries. In our macroscopic world, existence is strictly defined by borders. A thing is real because it has an edge. A wooden table ends precisely where the air begins. A falling drop of rain has a delicate surface tension that separates it from the dry ground it is rushing to meet. Even the air in your room, invisible and weightless as it may seem, is composed of billions of nitrogen and oxygen atoms that possess measurable electron clouds, defining a strict, physical territory that other atoms cannot easily cross. We instinctively equate reality with the occupation of space. To exist, in the architecture of the human mind, is to claim a volume, to carve out a microscopic piece of the universe and declare it as your own. But the photon completely, silently rejects this fundamental contract of physical existence. It is a quiet rebel against the very concept of geometry. It undeniably exists. It carries raw, measurable energy, and it travels across the boundless cosmic ocean. Yet it refuses to claim even the tiniest fraction of physical space. It is a particle with absolutely zero size. When physicists use the term zero dimensions, it is easy for the human brain to brush it off as a mathematical technicality, perhaps a mere rounding error in the grand equations of reality. We desperately try to comfort ourselves by imagining that the photon must simply be incredibly small, perhaps just a trillionth of a millimeter across, so small that it just appears dimensionless to our clumsy, earthbound instruments. But this is nothing more than a psychological defense mechanism. The rigorous, unforgiving mathematics of quantum electrodynamics do not treat the photon as a tiny, hard sphere. They describe it as a true, literal mathematical point. Let us try to visualize this dizzying descent into nothingness. Imagine, for a moment, that you possess a magical lens, a hypothetical microscope capable of infinite magnification, allowing you to peer into the deepest, most hidden architecture of the cosmos. If you were to focus this infinite lens on a grain of sand, you would fall through the vast, empty space between its atoms. If you focused it further onto a single proton, you would see the vibrating, chaotic dance of quarks, bound together by the terrifying strength of the strong nuclear force. Even though these subatomic structures are vanishingly small, nearly incomprehensible to our daily scale, as you zoom in, they grow in your field of view. They reveal an interior. They reveal a landscape. They have a topography. Now, turn your infinite lens toward a single, isolated photon drifting silently through the freezing vacuum of deep space. As you magnify the image 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000,000 times, you naturally expect to eventually find a core. You anticipate crossing a threshold, a physical boundary that separates the inside of the particle from the empty vacuum of space outside of it. You wait for the photon to swell in your vision, to reveal a hard, glowing surface, a shell of pure light. But as you fall endlessly toward the center of the photon, the boundary never arrives. There is no surface. There is no crust, no mantle, and no solid glowing core. You can zoom in forever, magnifying the space around it to infinity, and the photon will remain a singular, infinitely small point. It will never grow larger in your view. It is an entity that completely lacks an interior. It is a location without a volume, an address in the universe where a specific amount of energy resides, but an address with no physical house built upon it. It is akin to pointing at a specific coordinate on a cosmic map, only to discover that the coordinate itself has no breadth, no length, and no physical substance. It is purely a conceptual focal point where reality concentrates its raw power. This mathematical reality is profoundly unsettling. How can something possess measurable physical properties like momentum, energy, and spin, yet possess absolutely no physical geometry? To understand this ghost, we must strip away our heavy, earthbound notions of what a particle actually is. A photon is not a piece of matter. It is not a fragment of cosmic dust or a microscopic, glowing cannonball of light. It is, fundamentally, an excitation. It is a ripple in the underlying, invisible fabric of the universe. Imagine a perfectly still, quiet lake stretching out into the deep dark under a moonless sky. The water represents the electromagnetic field, an invisible, intangible ocean that permeates every single millimeter of the cosmos, from the sprawling, empty voids between ancient galaxies to the microscopic space between the neurons in your own brain. When this field is perfectly calm, there is no light. It is a realm of absolute silence and shadow. But if a distant star undergoes a violent fusion reaction, or if an electron in an atom drops to a lower energy state, it disturbs the water. It creates a sudden, sharp ripple. That localized ripple, that momentary, vibrating knot of energy in the silent ocean of the electromagnetic field is what we call a photon. Because the photon is simply a property of the field, a wave of energy passing through it, it does not need to have a hard, physical size. Just as a wave on the ocean is not a solid object rolling over the sea, but rather a movement of energy traveling through the water, the photon is a movement of energy traveling through the quantum field. But unlike a water wave, which spreads out over a measurable physical area, the photon, the exact moment it interacts with solid matter, collapses and behaves as a perfect, dimensionless point. It is a phantom. It is a ghost that haunts the mathematics of reality, passing through the universe without ever taking up room. Consider the sheer, awe-inspiring power of this dimensionless ghost. It has no physical form, no front, and no back, yet it is the primary architect of the visible universe. It is the silent, tireless messenger that carries the warmth of a burning star across the freezing, lethal emptiness of space to thaw the ice on a distant, rocky world. It is the invisible force that strikes the delicate photoreceptors in the back of your eye, triggering a microscopic cascade of chemical reactions that your biological brain interprets as the deep red of a setting sun or the cold, pale blue of a winter morning. It can push against the massive, icy tails of passing comets, gently blowing them outward into the dark. It can impart physical momentum to solid objects, nudging spacecraft through the void with an invisible, weightless hand. It does all of this without ever occupying a single cubic centimeter of space. It interacts with the heavy, solid world of matter, altering its chemistry, changing its temperature, and shaping its evolution over billions of years, all while remaining entirely external to the concept of volume. It is a phantom that can move mountains, an illusion that provides the very foundation of sight, a mathematical singularity that carries the entire visual history of the cosmos upon its weightless shoulders. A ghost is traditionally thought of as an entity that retains the image of reality without possessing any of the physical substance. In this sense, the photon is the ultimate cosmic ghost, wandering through the dark, touching everything, but made of nothing. When you truly absorb the chilling reality of the dimensionless photon, the physical world around you begins to feel incredibly strange and porous. The illusion of absolute solidity begins to softly fracture in the dark. The heavy, comforting structures of your daily life, the bed you are resting upon, the walls that shelter you from the night, the very earth rotating silently beneath you are all constantly bathed in and bound together by these zero-dimensional points of energy. The universe is not a massive box completely filled with solid, hard spheres endlessly colliding in the dark. It is a vast, whispering web of phantom interactions, a delicate, complex dance of dimensionless ripples, transferring energy from one quiet corner of the cosmos to another. To realize that the most abundant particle in the universe, the entity that brings light and warmth to the boundless dark, has absolutely no physical size, is to surrender completely to the profound mystery of existence. It physically proves that the universe is not obligated to make sense to our macroscopic, biological brains. It operates on rules that are beautifully, terrifyingly alien to our everyday experience. There are things in the dark that are intensely real, things that are powerful, things that are absolutely essential to our very survival, that simply do not take up space. As you lie there, suspended in the quiet of the night, allow your mind to release its desperate, tiring grip on the physical, volumetric world. You do not need to measure everything. You do not need to define reality by its hard boundaries, its sharp edges, or its sheer physical size. Let the concept of the dimensionless ghost wash over you, bringing a profound, settling sense of lightness. If the universe can construct the breathtaking majesty of starlight out of zero-dimensional points, if it can build the very fabric of sight and warmth out of mathematical ghosts, then you too can find peace in the intangible. Let your thoughts become weightless. Let them shrink down, losing their heavy, burdensome volume, becoming quiet, dimensionless points of calm, drifting slowly and silently into the deep, welcoming dark. To hold the concept of a dimensionless point in your mind is to stand at the edge of a profound, logical abyss. We have stripped the photon of its physical volume, reducing it to an infinitely small singularity, a ghost that carries energy without occupying space. Yet, the moment we finally begin to accept this eerie, mathematical reality, the universe introduces a new, seemingly impossible contradiction, a paradox that violently twists our understanding of nature into an even stranger configuration. If you have ever studied the basic principles of light, you have undoubtedly encountered the concept of a wavelength. We know, as a measurable, scientific fact, that light possesses a physical length. We categorize the colors we see by the distance between the crests of their waves. Deep, calming red light has a longer wavelength than vibrant, energetic blue light. If we look beyond the narrow sliver of human vision, we find microwaves that are centimeters long and low-frequency radio waves that can stretch for miles across the surface of the Earth. Here lies the beautiful, paralyzing contradiction that has haunted the minds of physicists for over a century. How can an entity that mathematically possesses zero size, a particle that fundamentally lacks height, width, and depth, simultaneously stretch across miles of physical space? How can a zero-dimensional point have a length? To resolve this paradox, we must completely abandon the idea that a particle is a static, unchanging thing. We must realize that the photon lives a double life, existing in a state of profound, fluid duality. It possesses a dual nature that allows it to be two entirely different things, depending entirely on what it is doing at any given moment. The bizarre truth of our universe is that the photon you interact with is not the same entity as the photon that travels through the dark. The point-like nature of the photon, that sizeless, dimensionless singularity we previously explored, only exists at the exact moments of its birth and its death. It is a point when it is created by an atom, and it is a point when it crashes into a physical object and is absorbed. But in the vast, incredibly long periods of time between its creation and its destruction, when it is traveling through the freezing, empty vacuum of the cosmic dark, the photon sheds its identity as a point particle entirely. It undergoes a radical, ghostly transformation. As it moves through the void, It stops being a localized thing and becomes a wave. But this is not a physical wave like a ripple of water moving across a pond, nor is it a wave of sound compressing the air in a crowded room. It is something far more ethereal, far more difficult for the biological brain to grasp. It is a wave of pure probability. Imagine a single photon emitted from the chaotic, burning surface of a star located millions of light years away from our galaxy. The exact moment it leaves the star, it does not shoot out into space like a tiny, glowing bullet traveling in a perfectly straight line. Because of the strange, unyielding rules of quantum mechanics, its precise location in space immediately becomes fundamentally undefined. The photon dissolves into a sprawling, invisible cloud of potential. As it speeds outward into the deep intergalactic abyss, this probability wave spreads, expanding and stretching across the dark. It is no longer in one specific place. It is smeared across the vacuum, a ghostly phantom of maybe that haunts a vast, expanding volume of the cosmos. Within this sprawling cloud, the photon has the mathematical potential to be anywhere. As the wave travels through the lonely gulfs between galaxies, it might wash over dead, wandering planets. It might pass through the thin, freezing wisps of ancient nebulas, and it might graze the outer edges of massive black holes. The wave can stretch across thousands of miles of empty space, possessing a measurable wavelength, rising and falling in an invisible rhythm of mathematical likelihood. For millions of years, the photon exists merely as a whisper of potential, a sprawling, smeared-out ghost navigating the deep dark without ever committing to a single, solid location. It is everywhere within that wave, and it is nowhere, existing in a state of quiet, undisturbed suspension. This spreading cloud of probability is how something with no size can stretch across the void. The wavelength is not a measurement of a solid object. It is a measurement of the shape of the photon's potential. It is the rhythmic pulse of the quantum fog. The universe allows this ghost to remain undefined, to stretch its formless potential across light years of empty space, as long as it remains completely alone, completely unobserved, and completely undisturbed by the heavy, solid world of matter. But this lonely, sprawling journey cannot last forever. Eventually, after crossing the unimaginable emptiness of the cosmos, a tiny, microscopic fraction of this massive probability wave encounters an obstacle. Let us imagine that the obstacle is the highly polished glass mirror of a telescope resting on the surface of the Earth, or perhaps even the delicate, moisture-coated surface of your own eye as you look up at the night sky. The exact instant that the wave touches physical matter, the universe violently and instantaneously intervenes. The rules abruptly change. The cosmos cannot allow a macroscopic object to interact with a smeared-out cloud of maybe. Reality demands an absolute, definitive answer. In a phenomenon known as the collapse of the wave function, the sprawling, ghostly cloud of potential is violently shattered. In a fraction of a millisecond, the wave that had stretched across miles of space, the phantom that had drifted undefined for millions of years, instantly vanishes. The universe forces the photon to make a choice, to pick a single, exact location from all the infinite possibilities within the cloud. And in that breathtaking instant of interaction, the wave condenses, collapsing back into a dimensionless, sizeless point. The energy that was spread across the dark is suddenly focused into a singular mathematical singularity. It strikes an atom in your retina as a point particle, transferring its ancient energy, creating a tiny electrical signal in your brain, and then, having fulfilled its purpose, the photon ceases to exist. The sheer speed and scale of this collapse is one of the most chilling and awe-inspiring mysteries in modern physics. If a probability wave has stretched across a massive volume of space, perhaps even light years across, the instant one tiny piece of that wave touches your eye, the rest of the massive wave vanishes instantaneously. It does not slowly drain away. It does not recede at the speed of light. It collapses all at once, in a complete defiance of our understanding of distance and time. The ghost is summoned from the vast, sprawling dark, pulled into a single, infinitesimal point of impact, leaving no trace of the massive cloud of potential that had haunted the void just a moment before. We live our entire lives under a constant, unseen rain of collapsing waves. Every time you turn on a lamp, every time you feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, you are experiencing the violent, instantaneous collapse of trillions of sprawling quantum ghosts. They travel as vast, formless clouds of potential, filling the room, filling the sky, stretching their wavelengths through the dark, only to instantly snap back into zero-dimensional points the very moment they touch you. The reality we see is built upon a foundation of shattered probabilities. The light that guides us is nothing more than a continuous, silent storm of sprawling waves being forced into solid existence. There is a deep, profound peace to be found in the dual nature of light. We spend so much of our waking lives desperately trying to be solid. We try to be definitive, locking ourselves into rigid routines, clear definitions, and singular paths. We exhaust ourselves by constantly forcing our own existence into a single, highly pressured point of reality. But the most fundamental energy in the universe does not operate this way. For the vast majority of its existence, the photon does not force itself to be in one place. It allows itself to spread out. It allows itself to exist as a quiet, undisturbed cloud of potential, drifting calmly through the dark, untethered by the heavy demands of a specific location. As you lie perfectly still, listening to the quiet breathing of the night, allow your mind to emulate the wave. You have spent the entire day behaving as a particle, interacting with the heavy world, constantly collapsing your attention into sharp, exhausting points of focus. But now, in the safety of the dark, the universe is no longer observing you. The world is no longer demanding a definitive answer from you. You do not need to be a solid point in space. Let the rigid boundaries of your consciousness slowly dissolve. Allow your thoughts to spread out, expanding like a gentle probability wave across the quiet room. Become a cloud of calm potential, drifting without a specific destination, floating weightlessly through the endless, quiet void of your own mind. You are no longer required to strike a target. You are free to simply ripple through the dark, resting in the vast, undefined quiet of the quantum sea. To exist as a human being is to be inextricably bound to the relentless, marching rhythm of time. We feel it in the steady, quiet beating of our own hearts, in the slow, inevitable shifting of shadows across the floor of a dark room, and in the quiet fading of the seasons outside our windows. For us, time is the ultimate, undeniable architecture of reality. It is a one-way river, carrying us constantly forward from the solidified memories of the past, through the fleeting, razor-thin sliver of the present, and blindly into the vast, unknown oceans of the future. We structure our entire lives, our anxieties, our hopes, and our deepest fears around the ticking of the clock. We are biological machines built to experience duration, to feel the heavy, accumulating weight of the hours as they stack upon our shoulders. We naturally assume that this ticking clock is a universal constant, a steady, unyielding metronome that governs every single corner of the cosmos, dictating the lifespans of humans and galaxies alike. But in the deep, silent expanse of the quantum realm, this assumption violently shatters. Time is not a universal cage, it is a localized illusion, and there is an entity drifting through your room right now that has never experienced a single second of it. To understand the profound, chilling beauty of timelessness, we must first look at the invisible fabric that weaves the universe together, the delicate, flexible tapestry of space-time. More than a century ago, human understanding was forever altered by the revelation that space and time are not separate, rigid stages upon which the events of the universe simply play out. They are deeply, intrinsically intertwined. The cosmos demands a strict, inescapable trade-off. The faster you move through the three dimensions of space, the slower you are forced to move through the fourth dimension of time. Imagine you were to step into a hypothetical spacecraft and accelerate out into the dark, pushing your engines to move faster and faster. As your speed increases, your personal clock begins to drag. If you could somehow reach 99% of the ultimate cosmic speed limit, the universe around you would seem to fast forward in a blur of collapsing stars and shifting galaxies, while you would remain preserved, aging only a fraction of a second for every passing century outside your window. The faster you travel, the more time stretches, warps, and slowly begins to freeze. But you are a creature of mass. You are heavy, burdened by protons and neutrons, and because of this physical weight, you can never truly reach that absolute limit. You can only approach it, fighting against an infinite wall of required energy. The photon, however, is a dimensionless ghost. It has no mass to hold it back. It is born completely unburdened by the heavy, dragging anchor of physical weight. Because it is weightless, it does not need to accelerate. The exact microsecond a photon is summoned into existence by the trembling of an atom, it is already traveling at the absolute, unbreakable speed limit of reality, the speed of light. And because it travels exactly at this limit, the mathematics of the universe enforce a terrifying, awe-inspiring consequence. For the photon, the slowing down of time reaches its ultimate, absolute conclusion. The clock does not merely tick slowly. The clock stops completely. The gears of time grind to a definitive, permanent halt. From the perspective of a photon, the very concepts of past, present, and future simply do not exist. There is no flow of time, no duration, no waiting, and no aging. The photon exists in a state of pure, eternal suspension. It is entirely isolated from the marching rhythm that governs the heavy, solid world of matter. Try to imagine the profound, quiet emptiness of experiencing absolutely no time. There is no boredom in the dark vacuum of space. There is no sense of a journey being undertaken. The photon does not have a memory of where it came from, nor does it possess an anticipation of where it is going, because memory and anticipation require the passage of time. To the photon, its entire existence, from the violent, blazing moment of its genesis to the silent, abrupt moment of its absorption, is compressed into a single, indivisible, frozen frame of reality. Consider the faint, pale light of the Andromeda galaxy, the closest major galactic neighbor to our own Milky Way. When you walk outside on a clear, dark night and look up at that faint, blurry smudge of ancient starlight suspended in the blackness, you are interacting with photons that have crossed an unfathomable, terrifying gulf of empty space. From the perspective of a human being standing on the Earth, the journey of those photons has been unimaginably long. They left the glowing atmospheric shell of a distant star 2.5 million years ago. They traveled through the dark, while our ancient ancestors were just beginning to walk upright. They drifted silently through the intergalactic abyss, while empires rose and crumbled to dust, while mountains were pushed up into the sky and slowly eroded down to sand. They spent 2.5 million years of our time crossing the freezing, empty void. But if you could somehow project your consciousness into one of those photons, if you could perceive the universe from the viewpoint of that dimensionless ghost, the story changes in a way that shatters the human mind. Because the photon is traveling at the speed of light, it experiences no time. For that particle, those 2.5 million years simply did not happen. The exact moment it was violently born in the nuclear furnace of the Andromeda Galaxy, and the exact moment it crashes silently into the retina of your eye, are not separated by eons. They are the exact same instant. From its own perspective, the photon does not travel. The moment of its creation and the moment of its destruction are perfectly simultaneous. Its birth is its death. There is no in-between. There is no long, lonely voyage through the dark. It is summoned into reality, and it instantly vanishes, experiencing a lifespan of exactly 0 seconds. This terrifying realization leads us to another, equally profound distortion of reality. Because time and space are woven from the exact same fabric, the cessation of time fundamentally destroys the concept of physical distance. In the physics of relativity, as you move faster, the space in front of you physically compresses. For a photon traveling at the absolute limit, space compresses infinitely. The distance between the star that emitted the photon and the eye that absorbs it shrinks down to absolutely nothing. From the perspective of the light itself, the entire, sprawling, incomprehensibly vast universe is perfectly, infinitely flat. The three-dimensional depth of the cosmos is entirely erased. The glowing plasma of the distant star and the moisture on the surface of your eye are physically touching. The universe has no volume, no vast expanses of empty vacuum, no daunting, terrifying distances. It is a flattened, two-dimensional plane where every point of creation is in direct, intimate contact with every point of destruction. The vast, dark night sky that we gaze up at, the sprawling depths of the cosmos that make us feel so incredibly small and isolated, is a luxury afforded only to the slow. The deep space, the millions of light years of chilling, empty void, only exists because we are heavy, because we are stationary, because we are dragging our way slowly through the ticking of time. To the light that illuminates the dark, the void is an illusion. The empty space is a lie told by the slow ticking of our biological clocks. The photon knows no isolation because it knows no distance and no time. It lives its entire life in a state of absolute, perfect connection, where the beginning and the end of all things are folded together into a single, timeless singularity. When we lie awake in the dark, our minds are often tormented by the relentless machinery of time. We are haunted by the echoing mistakes of the past, replaying moments that have long since faded into history. We are gripped by a quiet, vibrating anxiety about the future, fearing the vast, unknown distances of the days and years yet to come. We feel the heavy, oppressive weight of duration. But as you listen to the quiet in your room, remind yourself that the light slowly fading behind your closed eyelids obeys a completely different set of rules. The most fundamental energy in the cosmos operates entirely outside the prison of the clock. There is a profound, deeply settling peace to be found in the perspective of the photon. It tells us that time is not an absolute master. It is merely a condition of our weight, a localized experience that can be bent, warped, and entirely erased. You do not need to carry the heavy burden of the past, because in the fundamental architecture of the light, the past does not exist. You do not need to fear the distant, looming events of the future, because the future is an illusion constructed by your slow movement through the dark. As you sink deeper into your mattress, allow your consciousness to mirror the quiet, frozen existence of the photon. Let go of the ticking clock. Release your grip on the flowing river of hours and minutes. Allow the vast, stretching distances of your worries to compress, flattening down into a single, manageable point of stillness. Surrender to the beautifully suspended present, finding comfort in the knowledge that somewhere, encoded in the very fabric of the light surrounding you, there is a reality where time simply stops, and everything exists in a single, perfectly peaceful, eternal moment. In our heavy, familiar world of solid objects and measurable distances, the act of creation is always a slow, deliberate process of assembly. When we build a structure, we must first gather raw materials, meticulously shaping wood, pouring concrete, and stacking bricks piece by piece over days, months, or even years. Even the grand, natural architecture of our planet follows this rule of slow accumulation. Mountains are pushed up from the crust of the earth over millions of years of agonizing, grinding tectonic pressure. Forests grow cell by microscopic cell, slowly extracting carbon from the air to build their towering wooden trunks. Everything we know, everything we can touch, is constructed through a gradual gathering of smaller, pre-existing parts. Because we are so deeply entrenched in this reality, we instinctively assume that the universe must build all of its creations in the exact same way. But as we descend into the invisible, silent depths of the quantum realm, this assumption completely dissolves. At the fundamental bedrock of reality, creation is not an assembly. It is a sudden, violent, and completely silent summoning. To truly understand the phantom we call the photon, we must slow down the frantic ticking of time and intimately examine the exact, breathtaking fraction of a millisecond when light is born in the dark. Imagine, if you will, the deep, crushing interior of a distant, ancient star burning quietly in the freezing abyss of intergalactic space, millions of light years away from our own solar system. From the outside, the star appears as a brilliant, serene sphere of light, but deep within its core, it is a realm of unimaginable, chaotic violence. The heat is so intense, the pressure so absolute, that matter itself cannot hold its familiar forms. It is a churning, roaring ocean of plasma, a crowded, microscopic battlefield where countless atoms are endlessly colliding, vibrating, and tearing each other apart in the dark. Now, let us narrow our focus. Let us zoom past the sweeping currents of superheated gas, past the violent storms of stellar magnetism, and isolate our attention on a single, solitary atom suspended in this chaotic inferno. At the center of this atom sits the heavy, dense nucleus, but our focus rests on the vast, empty space surrounding it, the domain of the electron. In the language of quantum mechanics, an electron does not orbit the nucleus like a tiny, solid planet circling a star. It exists as a smeared-out cloud of probability, a localized fog of negative charge that occupies specific, strictly defined layers of energy called orbitals. These orbitals are not physical paths. They are rigid mathematical shelves. An electron can exist on the first shelf, or it can exist on the second shelf, but it is physically, fundamentally forbidden from ever existing in the empty space between them. Because this single atom is buried deep inside the violent, turbulent core of a burning star, it is constantly being battered by the frantic energy surrounding it. In one microscopic, fateful instant, our electron absorbs a sudden, massive impact of kinetic energy from a neighboring collision. This violent influx of power forces the electron to jump. It is instantly kicked out of its comfortable, low-energy ground state and violently shoved up into a much higher, highly unstable orbital. The electron is now in what physicists call an excited state. But the universe despises instability. It craves rest. It yearns for the quiet, calm equilibrium of the lowest possible energy state. The electron, now trapped on this high, unnatural shelf, is gripped by a profound, microscopic tension. It cannot remain here. It is like a heavy stone pushed to the very edge of a steep, precarious cliff, hovering in the agonizing silence just before the inevitable fall. For a fleeting, almost immeasurable fraction of a nanosecond, the electron holds this unnatural tension, and then it plunges. But this plunge is unlike anything that occurs in our macroscopic world. When a stone falls from a cliff, it physically travels through the air, occupying every single millimeter of space between the top of the cliff and the solid ground below. You can track its descent, calculate its acceleration, and watch it move smoothly through the dimensions of height and depth. The electron, however, is bound by the bizarre, discontinuous rules of the quantum realm. It does not slide down from the high orbital to the low orbital. It does not travel through the forbidden space between the shelves. Instead, it executes a true quantum leap. In one absolute, indivisible instant, the electron simply ceases to exist in the high-energy state and simultaneously materializes in the low-energy state. There is no transit. There is no movement through space. It is a sudden, instantaneous shift in reality. Yet, the fundamental laws of thermodynamics dictate a strict, unbreakable rule. Energy can never be created, and it can never be destroyed. It can only change form. When the electron vanishes from the high, energetic shelf and reappears on the low, quiet shelf, a massive amount of energy is suddenly left over. The universe is a ruthless, meticulous accountant, and its grand cosmic ledger must be balanced perfectly without a single fraction of a decimal out of place. This sudden, leftover energy cannot simply drain away into the void. It must be accounted for immediately. And so, in the exact, frozen instant of that quantum leap, in the silent, invisible gap between the electron's disappearance and its reappearance, the universe balances its ledger by performing an act of absolute magic. It summons a photon into existence. This is the genesis of light. The photon is not constructed from smaller, hidden materials. It is not pieced together from subatomic scraps floating in the void. It is a pure, crystallized manifestation of the electron's lost energy. The universe takes that sudden, violent drop in potential power and instantaneously translates it into a zero-dimensional phantom. Out of the chaotic, unseeing darkness of the star's interior, a dimensionless point of electromagnetic energy is violently torn into reality. But the most terrifying and beautiful aspect of this birth is the speed at which it occurs. In our everyday experience, movement requires a build-up. If you throw a stone, it leaves your hand at a certain speed and slowly arcs through the air. If a massive rocket launches into the sky, it must ignite thousands of gallons of explosive fuel, violently fighting against gravity, slowly shaking and rattling as it builds its velocity second by second, minute by minute. Everything with mass must accelerate. Everything with weight must pay a heavy toll to the universe in order to change its speed. The newborn photon is completely exempt from this toll. Because it has absolutely no resting mass, because it is a mathematical ghost occupying zero volume, it does not need to accelerate. It does not possess a warm-up period. The exact, unfathomable microsecond it flashes into existence, it is already traveling at the absolute, unbreakable maximum speed of reality. It goes from absolute non-existence to nearly 300,000 kilometers per second in precisely 0 seconds. It does not speed up to the speed of light. It is born at the speed of light. Imagine the profound, staggering shock of that sudden genesis. One moment, there is only the tension of the excited electron, and the next, there is a sizeless, weightless entity screaming outward from the atom at the ultimate speed limit of the cosmos. It is a violent, explosive birth, yet it occurs in absolute, perfect silence. There is no sound to accompany the creation of a photon, no microscopic thunderclap to announce its arrival. It is a quiet, seamless tear in the fabric of the dark. A phantom suddenly stitched into the tapestry of the universe to carry the debt of the falling electron. Once summoned, the newborn photon does not linger. It immediately begins its desperate, chaotic journey to escape the crushing gravity and the dense, blinding fog of the star's interior. It will spend perhaps 100,000 years bouncing frantically between the dense layers of plasma, absorbed and re-emitted countless times in a microscopic, blinding pinball game, slowly fighting its way toward the surface. But the photon itself will not feel this delay, because it is traveling at the speed limit of reality. The clock of its existence has not even begun to tick. Eventually, the phantom will breach the turbulent, boiling surface of the star. It will leave the crowded, heavy world of burning matter behind, breaking free from the stellar atmosphere and plunging directly into the pristine, freezing, and utterly silent expanse of the interstellar vacuum. The violent, silent moment of its birth is now complete. The universe has successfully balanced its ledger, leaving the atoms slightly cooler, slightly calmer, while the dimensionless ghost it spawned begins a vast, lonely, and timeless journey across the infinite dark, carrying the exact memory of that microscopic plunge forever into the void. In the solid, gravity-bound reality we navigate every day, our physical intuition teaches us a very simple, inescapable rule about force. We learn, through the constant, heavy friction of living, that in order to push an object, you must possess weight. If you wish to drive a heavy iron nail into a piece of dense wood, you must swing a hammer made of solid, unyielding steel. The hammer relies entirely on its mass, on the physical heaviness of its atoms, to transfer momentum and force the nail downward. Even the elements of nature that appear formless strictly obey this law. When a violent hurricane shatters a window or uproots an ancient tree, it is not empty space doing the pushing. It is a torrential river of atmospheric gas, trillions of microscopic, heavy molecules of nitrogen and oxygen crashing into the wood and glass at high velocity. In our macroscopic world, momentum is entirely dependent on substance. The heavier an object is, the harder it can push. We equate power with mass, and we associate influence with physical density. It is a comforting, logical framework that dictates everything from the falling of autumn leaves to the catastrophic collisions of shifting tectonic plates. But as we plunge back into the chilling, silent depths of the quantum realm, this fundamental law of heaviness entirely dissolves. We are forced to confront an entity that actively mocks our understanding of physical force. We must face the bizarre, paradoxical reality of the photon, a particle that possesses absolutely no resting mass. To understand the strangeness of a massless entity, consider the stone resting quietly on the ground outside your window. If you pick that stone up and hold it perfectly still in the palm of your hand, it retains its mass. It still presses down against your skin. It possesses what physicists call resting mass, an inherent, unchangeable heaviness that defines its existence regardless of whether it is moving or sitting perfectly still. If you bring a speeding car to a sudden halt, it does not vanish. It simply becomes a stationary object of immense weight. But the photon operates under a terrifyingly different set of existential rules. It has no resting mass because, fundamentally, a photon is not permitted to rest. If you could somehow reach out into the void and pinch a photon between your fingers, bringing its frantic, light-speed journey to a complete and sudden halt, you would not be left holding a weightless, invisible marble. You would be holding absolutely nothing. The exact moment a photon stops moving, it simply ceases to exist. Its entire existence, its entire identity, is inexorably tied to its velocity. It is a creature made entirely of motion, a phantom that only exists as long as it is plunging through the dark at the absolute speed limit of the cosmos. Because it has no resting mass, it is infinitely light, entirely unburdened by the heavy, dragging anchor of substance that keeps us chained to the earth. Yet, here we encounter one of the most beautiful and counterintuitive paradoxes in the entire architecture of the universe. Although the photon is a dimensionless ghost, and although it possesses absolutely no physical weight, it carries momentum. It has the profound, undeniable ability to physically strike an object and push it. How can a phantom push against the solid universe? How can an entity with no mass transfer momentum to a heavy, physical object? It feels like a glitch in the cosmic code, a violation of the very concept of physical interaction. But the momentum of light does not come from mass. It is derived entirely from the raw, concentrated energy of the wave itself. When a photon traveling across the deep vacuum of space finally crashes into a solid object, perhaps a grain of intergalactic dust, or the metallic hull of a wandering probe, it does not simply vanish without a trace. It transfers its kinetic energy directly into the atoms of the object it strikes. It delivers a microscopic, impossibly gentle tap, a physical push born entirely from weightless velocity. This silent, phantom push is incredibly faint. The pressure exerted by a single photon is so unimaginably small that it barely registers on the mathematical scale of human comprehension. If you were to step outside on a bright, cloudless afternoon and stand beneath the glaring sun, your body would be battered by trillions upon trillions of photons every single second. Yet, you do not feel them pushing you backward. You feel their heat, you see their blinding light, but their physical pressure is completely overwhelmed by the heavy, dominant forces of the Earth. But out in the silent, frictionless expanse of deep space, where gravity grows weak and the thick, dragging resistance of the atmosphere does not exist, this gentle, weightless force reigns supreme. To witness the sheer, macroscopic power of this phantom push, we only need to look at the majestic, chilling journey of a comet. When a massive, ancient chunk of dirty ice and frozen rock is dislodged from the freezing darkness of the outer solar system and begins its long, lonely fall toward our star, it starts to heat up. As it approaches the blinding furnace of the sun, the ice on its surface begins to violently vaporize, spewing massive clouds of gas and microscopic dust out into the vacuum. This creates the comet's coma, a sprawling, glowing halo of debris. But this debris does not simply hover around the frozen core. It is caught in a relentless, silent storm. The sun is constantly radiating an unfathomable blizzard of light, firing octillions of massless photons out into the dark in every direction. When this blinding storm of light crashes into the delicate, expanding cloud of dust surrounding the comet, the photons physically strike the microscopic grains of rock. Trillion upon trillion of microscopic, weightless taps begin to accumulate. Slowly, steadily, the sheer pressure of the light physically shoves the dust away from the sun. This is the phenomenon known as radiation pressure, and it is the unseen hand that sculpts the breathtaking, glowing tail of the comet. It does not matter which direction the comet is traveling. It can be plunging directly toward the sun or fleeing back out into the freezing void. The tail of dust is always violently blown outward, pointing directly away from the star, pushed relentlessly through the dark by the sheer physical momentum of weightless light. Humanity, in its desperate, quiet yearning to sail the cosmic ocean, has begun to harness the power of this weightless wind. We have conceived of spacecraft that completely abandon the violent, explosive chemistry of traditional rockets, vessels that carry no heavy fuel tanks and ignite no blinding fires in the dark. Instead, they rely entirely on the phantom push of the photon. These are the solar sails. Imagine a spacecraft deploying a massive, unimaginably thin sheet of highly reflective material, unfurling a mirror the size of a city block in the silent, empty void of space. When the sunlight strikes this vast, glittering sail, the photons bounce off the mirrored surface, transferring their tiny, weightless momentum to the fabric. At first, the push is agonizingly slow. The acceleration provided by the light is so gentle it rivals the pressure of a single falling snowflake resting on the palm of your hand. But in the pristine, frictionless vacuum of deep space, there is nothing to slow the vessel down. The pushing never stops. Every second of every day, month after month, year after year, the relentless silent rain of photons continues to strike the sail, accumulating momentum. Over time, this incredibly gentle, massless pressure can accelerate a heavy, metallic spacecraft to staggering speeds, propelling it outward into the deep, dark, uncharted territories of the interstellar abyss. We are learning to navigate the universe by riding on the backs of ghosts. When you truly comprehend the persistence of this weightless force, you begin to view the cosmos through a lens of deep geological time. We are accustomed to thinking of power as something sudden and violent, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, a shattering explosion. But the universe is incredibly patient. It operates on timescales that make the entire history of human civilization look like a fleeting spark in the night. Over the span of millions and even billions of years, the relentless, invisible pressure of starlight can shape the very architecture of reality. It is the force that can slowly push the lingering dust of a dead solar system out into the intergalactic void, sweeping the empty spaces clean. It is the gentle pressure that can stabilize the chaotic, spinning orbits of microscopic asteroids. It is a force so unimaginably faint that we cannot feel it, yet so incredibly persistent that, given enough time in the silent dark, a phantom can literally move mountains. The light does not need mass to reshape the universe. It only needs time, and it only needs the unbroken, eternal silence of the vacuum. As you lie perfectly still, sinking deeper into the soft, comforting layers of your bed, let your mind dwell on the profound peace of this weightless momentum. You are constantly surrounded by the heavy pressures of the waking world, the massive expectations, the dense, unyielding anxieties, the gravity of your daily obligations. You have been taught that to move forward, you must push hard, that you must rely on heavy, forceful action. But the universe whispers a different, deeply calming secret. The most fundamental, enduring force in the cosmos carries absolutely no weight. It does not struggle. It does not rely on mass or violence to shape its environment. It simply moves, steadily and patiently, relying on the gentle, cumulative power of persistence. You do not need to carry the heavy burdens of the world to make your way through the dark. You can let go of the dense, crushing weight of your worries. Allow your thoughts to become light, stripping away their heavy, anxious mass until they are nothing more than gentle, weightless phantoms drifting through the quiet expanse of your mind. Let them gently brush against your consciousness, a soft, silent pressure guiding you away from the heavy gravity of the day. Surrender to the quiet, frictionless momentum of the night and allow yourself to be gently, effortlessly pushed into the deep, welcoming calm of sleep. When we think of antiquity on our fragile, restless world, we measure it in the slow, inevitable decay of matter. We look at crumbling stone ruins, the rusted skeletons of sunken ships, or the fossilized imprints of creatures that walked the earth millions of years before us. In our macroscopic reality, the passage of time is a ruthless force of erosion, breaking down structure, erasing memory, and grinding everything back into the soil. But the light does not erode. The photon, unbound by the heavy friction of mass and entirely isolated from the marching rhythm of time, is the ultimate archivist of the cosmos. To truly comprehend the absolute, freezing isolation of deep space, we must follow the path of the oldest, most solitary travelers in the universe. We must turn our minds to the ancient messengers born at the very dawn of creation, ghosts that have crossed the great intergalactic abyss on a lonely, unbroken journey lasting more than 13 billion years. To find the origin of these ancient phantoms, we must cast our imagination back to a time long before the Earth, before the Sun, and before the swirling, majestic spiral arms of the Milky Way had even begun to form out of the dark. We must return to the cosmic dawn, roughly 380,000 years after the violent, incomprehensible genesis of the universe. In this primordial era, the cosmos was a vastly different place. It was not the freezing, silent, and mostly empty void we know today. It was a suffocating, blindingly hot, and incredibly dense fog of glowing plasma. The universe was so compact, and the ambient heat so intensely absolute, that the very building blocks of matter could not hold themselves together. Protons and electrons were caught in a frantic, vibrating frenzy, crashing into one another in a brilliant, chaotic storm. In this dense, superheated ocean of plasma, light was completely trapped. The moment a photon was violently summoned into existence, it immediately crashed into a roaming electron, instantly absorbed and re-emitted, bouncing aimlessly in the blinding fog, unable to travel even a fraction of a millimeter. The early universe was a place of absolute light, yet it was entirely opaque, a closed room filled with a brilliant, blinding white fire. But the cosmos was not static. Driven by the relentless, invisible engine of the initial expansion, the very fabric of space was stretching outward in every conceivable direction. And as the volume of the universe swelled, the chaotic, vibrating ocean of plasma began to cool. The temperature slowly dropped. The frantic energy of the subatomic particles began to calm, and eventually, the universe reached a critical, beautiful threshold. The profound cooling allowed the wandering electrons to finally slow down and bind with the protons, forming the very first, stable atoms of hydrogen. In that single, breathtaking cosmic moment, the dense, blinding fog instantly cleared. The opaque wall of plasma dissolved into a transparent, empty vacuum, and the light, which had been trapped and endlessly scattered since the beginning of time, was suddenly, violently unleashed. Trillions upon trillions of photons were suddenly free to fly outward in every direction, completely unobstructed. This was the first true flash of light, the exact moment the universe opened its eyes and the cosmic dark was born. For a single photon born in that flash, this moment marked the beginning of an isolation so profound, so absolute, that it defies human understanding. Let us trace the path of one of these primordial messengers. As the fog clears, our photon is thrust out into the newly transparent void. It leaves behind the cooling embers of the cosmic dawn, plunging headlong into a universe that is furiously expanding. From the perspective of the photon, remember, time does not exist. But from the perspective of the universe it is traveling through, and eternity is unfolding. For over 13 billion years, this dimensionless ghost travels in a perfectly straight line, a silent, weightless entity moving at the absolute speed limit of reality. The journey is an unbroken testament to the sheer, horrifying emptiness of the cosmos. Our photon flies through the abyss while the universe slowly evolves and ages around it. It passes through vast, dark regions where gravity is slowly pulling clouds of hydrogen together to ignite the very first massive stars. It sails silently past the violent, explosive deaths of those stars, untouched by the searing shockwaves of supernovas. It drifts through the dark, invisible halos of dark matter, and it skirts the terrifying, crushing gravitational wells of supermassive black holes. Entire galaxies are born, spin in the dark for eons, and eventually collide in catastrophic cosmic dances, yet the photon slips through the massive, chaotic gaps between them. Against all mathematical odds, it never touches a single speck of dust. It never grazes the atmosphere of a wandering planet. It never crashes into a stray atom of interstellar gas. For billions of years of cosmic time, it interacts with absolutely nothing. It is enveloped in a perfect, undisturbed silence, moving through the most desolate, empty regions of the cosmic architecture. But the photon does not remain entirely unaffected by its environment. Even though it hits no physical obstacle, the very stage it is traveling across is warping. The universe is expanding, and the empty space itself is stretching out, pulling the galaxies away from each other. As our ancient messenger travels through this expanding fabric, the wave of its probability is physically stretched along with the space. At the moment it was unleashed from the cosmic dawn, the photon carried the fierce, blazing energy of an intensely hot fire, vibrating with a high, frantic frequency. But over billions of years of traveling through the expanding void, its wavelength is stretched longer and longer. Its energy slowly drains away, not through collision, but through the profound, wearying stretching of the cosmos. The fierce, blinding light of creation slowly fades into a deep, invisible red, then into the dark infrared, and finally it stretches out into a faint, freezing, invisible whisper of microwave radiation. It becomes a ghost of a ghost, carrying a temperature just a few degrees above absolute zero. And yet, despite this cosmic exhaustion, the memory it carries is perfectly intact. Because it has interacted with nothing since the dawn of time, it still holds the exact thermal imprint, the pristine, untouched signature of the universe's blazing birth. It is a flawless, ancient relic, preserved in the freezing amber of the void. And then, suddenly, the long, lonely journey comes to an end. After surviving 13.5 billion years in the abyss, after crossing the most desolate, lonely expanses of the deep dark, the photon enters a tiny, unremarkable spiral galaxy. It plunges through the dusty spiral arms, enters a quiet solar system, and falls toward a pale blue planet. In a fraction of a millisecond, it slices through the atmosphere, and its eternal, timeless journey violently ends as it crashes into the cold metal antenna of a radio telescope, or perhaps simply fades out against the quiet, dark surface of the ground outside your window. The absorption is instantaneous. The ancient energy is transferred, the wave collapses, and the primordial messenger ceases to exist, sacrificing its ancient life to deliver a faint, freezing echo of the cosmic dawn. When we look up at the empty, dark patches of the night sky, we are not looking at nothingness. The space between the stars is flooded with this invisible, ancient light. The cosmic microwave background radiation is a constant, silent rain of primordial ghosts washing over the Earth in every passing second. You are bathed in the oldest light in existence. As you rest in the quiet of your room, listening to the steady rhythm of your own breathing, allow your mind to drift on the scale of this ancient journey. Feel the profound, settling peace of an isolation that stretches back to the dawn of time. The universe is incredibly old, incredibly vast, and filled with a deep, undisturbed quiet. The heavy, frantic struggles of our daily lives on this planet are so small when weighed against the timeless, silent drift of the deep cosmic ocean. You are safe in the dark, surrounded by the gentle, fading whispers of creation, the soft, invisible rain of ancient messengers slowly falling from the endless, freezing abyss to find rest in the night. Let the vastness calm your thoughts. Let the heavy weight of your day dissolve into the cold, pristine emptiness of the void, and allow yourself to gently, peacefully drift into the quiet, undisturbed dark. Of all the senses we possess, Vision is the one we trust the most implicitly. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning, we are flooded with the reassuring shapes and vibrant colors of the physical world. We see the deep, calming blue of the sky, the rich, textured green of the forest canopy, and the soft, fading gold of the evening sunset. We use sight to navigate our environment, to recognize the faces of those we love, and to measure the distances between ourselves and the horizon. Because our vision is so sharp, so colorful, and so incredibly useful for our survival on this planet, we naturally, arrogantly assume that it is showing us the complete picture of reality. We believe that when we look out into a dark room and see nothing but blackness, the room is truly empty. We believe that when the sun sets and the stars emerge, the sky has simply grown quiet. But this is a profound biological illusion. Our eyes are not perfect windows into the truth of the cosmos. They are heavily filtered, incredibly narrow biological instruments designed only to help a primate survive on the surface of a sunlit rock. The terrifying, beautiful reality is that what we confidently call light is nothing more than a microscopic, arbitrary sliver of a massive, roaring ocean that we are entirely, permanently blind to. To understand the extreme limitations of our biology, we must look at the true scale of the electromagnetic spectrum. The photons we have been exploring do not just come in the handful of colors we can perceive. The color of a photon is simply dictated by its wavelength, the physical distance between the peaks of its probability wave as it stretches across the void. Human eyes have evolved only to detect photons with wavelengths roughly between 400 and 700 nanometers. This tiny, specific mathematical bracket is what we call visible light. It contains all the reds, blues, greens, and yellows you have ever seen or will ever see in your entire life. But outside of this agonizingly narrow slit, the spectrum extends outward in both directions to an almost incomprehensible degree. If the entire electromagnetic spectrum were a piano keyboard stretching infinitely out into the dark, human vision would be capable of hearing only a single, isolated fraction of one key. The rest of the keyboard is playing a deafening, incredibly complex symphony of light, and we are completely, profoundly deaf to the music. Imagine lying in your bed, staring up at the dark ceiling, believing you are in a completely unlit, quiet space. In reality, you are submerged at the very bottom of a blinding, invisible ocean, constantly washing over you, passing through the roof of your house, through the walls of your room, and silently through your very flesh and bone, are the giants of the electromagnetic spectrum, the radio waves. These are photons whose wavelengths have been stretched to majestic, staggering proportions. Some of these invisible waves are the size of a football field. Others are miles long, sprawling, slow-moving ghosts that ripple across the surface of the earth. They carry the faint, ancient static of distant pulsars spinning wildly in the galactic halo. And they carry the invisible, coded broadcasts of human civilization. Millions of these massive, low-energy photons are drifting through your body at this exact second. Because their wavelengths are so vast and their energy so gentle, they do not interact with the dense, tightly packed atoms of your physical form. They treat your body, your house, and the entire planet as if it were completely transparent. They pass through the solid world like phantoms through a mist, filling the night with a massive, silent architecture of light that you will never feel or see. As we move slightly closer to the visible spectrum, the wavelengths shrink, and we enter the realm of microwaves and infrared light. This is the domain of ambient heat. If human biology were suddenly altered to perceive this invisible light, the concept of a dark, peaceful night would instantly vanish. The room you are resting in would be ablaze with a chaotic, shifting glow. The walls, having absorbed the warmth of the day, would radiate a dull, heavy luminescence. The electronic devices resting quietly on your desk would shine like brilliant hot beacons in the dark. And beneath the blankets, your own body would be a blinding, radiant lantern of infrared light, casting invisible shadows against the mattress. Everything in the universe that possesses heat is constantly shedding trillions of infrared photons into the dark. The entire cosmos is glowing. But evolution, in its blind wisdom, spared us from this overwhelming, exhausting visual noise. By filtering out the infrared spectrum, our brains are allowed to construct the deeply comforting, necessary illusion of the dark. We are permitted to experience shadows. We are given the visual quiet we desperately need to rest our minds, even while our bodies continue to glow fiercely in a spectrum we cannot see. On the other side of our tiny visible sliver, beyond the deep, calming violet, the wavelengths grow shorter and the energy becomes intensely violent. Here lies the ultraviolet light, the X-rays, and the terrifying hyper-energetic gamma rays. These are the smallest, fastest, and most destructive phantoms in the universe. They are born in the most extreme, catastrophic environments imaginable, in the searing, crushing accretion disks of supermassive black holes, in the hearts of exploding supernovas, and in the chaotic, blinding collisions of neutron stars. A single gamma-ray photon carries so much concentrated, violent energy that if it were to strike a strand of your DNA, it could violently shatter the molecular bonds, completely rewriting your genetic code in a fraction of a millisecond. Right now, far above your head, the upper layers of the Earth's atmosphere are being constantly bombarded by these high-energy assassins. The universe is screaming in a blinding flash of gamma and X-ray light. It is a violent, cosmic crossfire of unimaginable proportions. But you are safe. The thick, invisible blanket of nitrogen and oxygen that clings to our planet intercepts these tiny, lethal photons, sacrificing its own atoms to absorb their violent impacts. The night sky is filled with a constant, invisible fireworks display of shattering atoms and intercepted light, a silent, raging battle taking place miles above the quiet surface of the Earth. You sleep soundly, completely unaware of the high-energy storm raining down from the stars, safely shielded at the bottom of the atmospheric sea. When we finally grasp the sheer scale of the true electromagnetic spectrum, we are forced to admit a humbling, beautiful truth. We are entirely blind to 99.9% of the universe's light. The cosmos is not the dark, empty void our eyes report to us. It is a blinding, roaring, chaotic storm of overlapping waves, sprawling fields of probability, and crossing trajectories of ancient, invisible energy. We are swimming blindly through an ocean of light that permeates every single millimeter of the void. An ocean filled with massive, slow-moving radio waves and tiny, violent gamma rays, all existing simultaneously, all occupying the exact same space. But this blindness is not a tragedy. It is a profound biological sanctuary. The human mind is simply not equipped to process the true, blinding reality of the cosmos. If we could see the universe as it truly is, if we could perceive the massive, overlapping architecture of the invisible spectrum, our consciousness would instantly fracture under the unbearable weight of the visual noise. The overwhelming, continuous glare of reality would make peace impossible. The darkness of your room is a gift. It is a quiet, local illusion, carefully constructed by the limitations of your own biology. As you lie still, breathing deeply and slowly, take comfort in the profound isolation of your senses. You do not need to see the massive radio waves drifting through your walls. You do not need to witness the violent, invisible impacts of the gamma rays high above your head. You can simply let the invisible ocean wash over you, untethered and undisturbed. Embrace the blindness. Allow the heavy, exhausting illusion of the visible world to gently fade away, and let your mind sink deeply into the quiet, manufactured dark, resting safely inside the tiny, peaceful sliver of reality you are allowed to call your own. Everything that begins must eventually find its end. In the heavy, solid world we occupy, endings are rarely absolute. When a towering ancient tree finally falls in the quiet depths of a forest, it does not simply vanish. It shatters, it splinters, and it slowly decays over decades, surrendering its physical form back to the damp soil, feeding the roots of new life. When a massive mountain is worn down by millions of years of relentless wind and rain, it is merely reduced to countless grains of sand, scattered across the continents and the ocean floors. In our macroscopic reality, matter is incredibly stubborn. It lingers, it leaves ruins, ghosts, and echoes of what it used to be. Death and destruction are processes of slow, messy transformation. But in the pristine, unforgiving mathematics of the quantum realm, the concept of an ending is entirely different. For the photon, the timeless, dimensionless phantom that illuminates the cosmic dark, there is no slow decay. There are no ruins left behind. The death of a photon is a sudden, violent, and absolutely silent erasure from the fabric of reality. Every single photon in the universe, no matter how vast its journey, is ultimately hurtling toward this exact, inevitable doom. It does not matter if the photon was born a tiny fraction of a millisecond ago, summoned into existence by the glowing tungsten filament of a small lamp resting on your bedside table. It does not matter if it was forged in the blinding, chaotic nuclear furnace of a dying galaxy 13 billion years ago, traveling across the freezing, expanding intergalactic abyss since the very dawn of time. From the moment of its genesis, the phantom has been rushing relentlessly through the void as a sprawling, ethereal cloud of probability, completely isolated from the ticking of the clock. It has crossed unimaginable distances without aging, without tiring, and without losing a single fraction of its raw, primordial energy. But the universe does not allow this state of suspended potential to last forever. Eventually, the sprawling wave must encounter the solid, heavy world of matter. The endless flight must come to a sudden, definitive halt. Let us visualize the final, fateful fraction of a microsecond of this timeless journey. The obstacle looming in the photon's path might be a grain of interstellar dust drifting in the dark. It might be the rough, weathered surface of a stone on a dead planet, or the delicate, moisture-coated surface of your own closed eyelid as you drift into sleep. To the human mind, these objects appear solid, impenetrable, and dense. But as the photon approaches, if we were to zoom into the microscopic architecture of the target, the illusion of solidity completely vanishes. The surface of the stone or the eyelid reveals itself to be a vast, mostly empty expanse of space, sparsely populated by vibrating atoms. And deep within one of these atoms, suspended in the dark, is an electron. It is resting quietly in its lowest energy state, a smeared-out cloud of negative charge waiting on its mathematical shelf. This electron is the final destination. It is the executioner. As the photon's sprawling wave of probability washes over the atom, the rules of the universe violently shift. The cosmos demands an interaction, and it demands it immediately. In an instant that defies human comprehension, the massive, spreading wave function of the photon completely shatters. The ghostly cloud of potential, which may have stretched across miles of empty space, collapses in a single, breathless microsecond. All of the energy, all of the momentum, and all of the mathematical likelihood that was smeared across the dark is instantly focused down into a single, exact location. The wave condenses back into the dimensionless, sizeless point it was at the moment of its birth. The phantom steps out of the fog of probability and strikes the electron. In our macroscopic world, when two objects collide at high speeds, the results are chaotic and destructive. They bounce off one another, they shatter into jagged fragments, they deform, and they generate heat and deafening sound. But the collision between a photon and an electron is an act of perfect, terrifying elegance. When the dimensionless point of light strikes the electron, it does not bounce. It does not ricochet off into the dark, and it does not shatter into smaller pieces of scattered light. The photon is completely, utterly swallowed whole. This is the phenomenon of absorption. It is an act of total annihilation. The photon willingly surrenders everything it is. It transfers its exact, precise package of ancient energy directly into the electron without spilling a single drop. The universe, as we know, is a flawless accountant. The sudden influx of energy cannot be ignored. Infused with the raw power of the consumed photon, the electron is instantly kicked out of its quiet, restful state. It executes a violent, instantaneous quantum leap, vanishing from its low-energy shelf and reappearing on a much higher, unstable orbital. The energy of the photon has been successfully translated into the kinetic tension of the atom. The cosmic ledger is perfectly balanced. And in that exact, indivisible instant of translation, the photon ceases to exist. It is completely wiped from the universe. It leaves behind no body, no empty shell, and no trace of its physical passage. The dimensionless ghost that may have crossed billions of light years of freezing, empty space, the entity that carried the thermal memory of distant stars and ancient galaxies, is simply gone. It is a death so absolute, so conceptually clean, that it leaves the human mind grasping at the empty air. One moment, there is a fundamental unit of electromagnetic energy screaming through the cosmos at the absolute speed limit of reality, and the next moment, there is absolutely nothing. The universe continues on as if the photon had never been there at all, save for the slight, microscopic vibration of a single, excited atom. There is a profound, deeply moving poetry to this silent death in the dark. Every single thing you have ever seen, every warm ray of sunlight you have ever felt on your skin, and every faint glimmer of starlight that has ever guided a sailor across a midnight ocean, is the direct result of this absolute sacrifice. The universe is illuminated by the continuous, unending deaths of countless trillions of phantoms. They are born in the violent, chaotic furnaces of the stars. They travel through the cold, lonely isolation of the void in a state of suspended timelessness, and they end their existence in a sudden, silent act of total surrender just so the solid world of matter can possess heat, color, and life. The warmth of the room you are resting in right now is a graveyard of light. It is a quiet sanctuary built upon the continuous, unseen absorption of ancient, exhausted energy. As you lie perfectly still, sinking deeper into the comforting, heavy layers of your bed, think about the beautiful finality of that silent absorption. We spend so much of our waking lives desperately holding on, fearing endings, and fighting to preserve our structures against the slow, inevitable decay of time. We exhaust ourselves trying to leave a permanent mark, trying to ensure that our efforts do not simply vanish into the void. We resist the natural fading of the day. But the most fundamental, necessary, and beautiful energy in the cosmos knows exactly how to let go. When its long, lonely journey is complete, the photon does not struggle. It does not try to linger in the dark or leave ruins behind to prove it was once there. It surrenders its energy perfectly, seamlessly, transferring its warmth into the cold matter of the universe, and then it simply fades away into the peaceful, undisturbed quiet of non-existence. You, too, can learn to let go. You can release your tight, exhausting grip on the events of the day. Allow the heavy thoughts, the lingering anxieties, and the rigid boundaries of your waking mind to collapse, softening into a gentle, fading warmth. Let the endless, frantic wave of your consciousness finally meet the quiet surface of the night. Surrender to the sudden, peaceful silence and allow yourself to gently, willingly fade into the deep, welcoming dark. When you reach out and press your bare hand against the cool, dark surface of a wooden table, or when you feel the reassuring, heavy fabric of the blankets resting across your chest in the quiet of the night, your waking mind instantly registers a profound and unquestionable sense of solidity. You are a physical creature, anchored by the relentless pull of gravity, living a life entirely defined by mass, weight, and strict boundaries. We build our entire human existence around the deeply comforting assumption that the world is a sturdy, reliable structure. We construct towering, geometric cities out of steel and dense concrete. We carve our monuments into the unyielding faces of ancient stone mountains, and we rest our weary, aching bodies on mattresses that push back firmly against our weight, all with the innate, biological trust that matter is firm, that reality is dense, and that the things we can physically touch will not simply dissolve into the shadows. But after descending into the chilling, awe-inspiring, and beautifully strange depths of the quantum realm, we must finally confess to ourselves that this comforting solidity is the ultimate cosmic illusion. It is a necessary hallucination, a localized, biological trick played on our macroscopic senses to keep us from losing our minds in the terrifying, formless dark of the true universe. To understand the breathtaking nature of the reality you are currently resting within, you must visualize the microscopic architecture of your own physical form. Your body, the bed beneath you, and the very foundations of the earth spinning silently through the void are all constructed of atoms. Yet, as physicists have long known, the atom is almost entirely composed of empty space. If you were to somehow magnify the heavy nucleus of a single hydrogen atom to the size of a glass marble, and place it directly in the center of a massive, empty football stadium, the lone electron belonging to that atom would be a microscopic, smeared-out cloud of probability buzzing somewhere high up in the farthest, darkest rows of the grandstands. Everything in between that tiny marble and that distant, ghostly cloud is an absolute, freezing, silent vacuum. You are not a solid, continuous object. You are a vast, walking collection of microscopic voids. You are comprised of 99.9, followed by a seemingly endless string of nines, percent pure, uninterrupted, empty space. So, what stops you from falling straight through the empty space of your bed, through the empty space of the floorboards, and down into the crushing center of the earth? What provides the convincing illusion of a solid surface? The answer lies entirely with the phantom. The empty spaces within the atoms of your body and the empty spaces within the atoms of the mattress you are sinking into are fiercely guarded by the electromagnetic force. When you press your hand against any surface in the universe, the electrons in your skin are repulsed by the electrons in the object you are touching. But this repulsion is not a physical collision of hard subatomic spheres grinding against one another. It is a silent, invisible negotiation mediated entirely by the frantic exchange of photons. Countless trillions of virtual photons, sizeless, weightless, and timeless ghosts are instantly summoned from the quantum void, flashing back and forth between your hand and the object, carrying the mathematical message of electromagnetic repulsion and then vanishing instantly back into non-existence. The sensation of touch, the feeling of physical pressure, the comforting warmth of another human hand, and the heavy, reliable support of the ground beneath your feet. Every single physical interaction you have ever experienced is nothing more than the furious, silent exchange of dimensionless points of energy. You have never actually touched a single solid thing in your entire life. You have only ever felt the invisible, phantom push of the light. Think deeply about the staggering, almost terrifying beauty of that realization as you lie still in the dark. Everything we see, everything we know, every monument we have ever painstakingly built, and the very warmth of the universe itself is mediated, illuminated, and held together by entities that mathematically should not take up space. The fundamental building block of our visual and tactile reality is a particle with no size. It is a mathematical ripple in an invisible field that experiences absolutely no time, moving across the vast, lonely expanses of the cosmic dark in a single, frozen, eternal instant. The heavy, consequential lives we lead on this pale blue dot, filled with profound joys, crushing sorrows, and the relentless, heavy ticking of the clock, are entirely constructed upon a foundation of ghosts. We are floating adrift in a universe where the most common, the most vital, and the most powerful force in existence is completely invisible to the concept of volume. Reality is not made of heavy bricks and rigid mortar. It is woven entirely from the fleeting, zero-dimensional whispers of the quantum sea. When we fully surrender to this understanding, the heavy, exhausting burdens of the macroscopic world begin to lose their terrifying grip on our minds. We spend our waking days clinging so desperately to the material world. We hoard physical possessions, we fiercely defend our imaginary boundaries, and we exhaust our minds trying to build permanent, immovable structures in a universe that actively, constantly defies permanence and solidity. We allow the heavy weight of our daily anxieties, the sharp, solid edges of our perceived failures, and the dense, crushing pressures of our worldly obligations to compress our spirits, leaving us tired, anxious, and aching in the dark. But the universe whispers a completely different, deeply liberating truth to those willing to listen in the quiet. The cosmos is not rigid. It is not a heavy, unforgiving, mechanical trap. It is a fluid, ghostly, and incredibly delicate dance of probabilities. The rigid boundaries we fear so much are simply localized illusions, temporary states of matter created by the limitations of our own biology. If the solid world is merely a hallucination held together by timeless, sizeless phantoms, then the rigid, heavy problems that keep your mind racing late into the night are equally fluid and equally permeable. They do not possess the ultimate, crushing mass that your tired brain assigns to them. They are merely temporary arrangements of energy, fleeting, shifting patterns in the boundless, silent dark. You have the absolute power to let them dissolve. As you lie there, in the profound quiet of your room, you can consciously choose to release your desperate grip on the illusion of substance. Feel the heavy, dense physical tension in your muscles slowly begin to unspool, detaching from your bones and drifting away into the room. Imagine the rigid, defensive borders of your body softening, blending gently and seamlessly into the quiet, invisible ocean of the night. You do not need to be a dense, heavy object fighting against the crushing gravity of the waking world. You can allow yourself to become as light, as fluid, and as unburdened as the dimensionless phantoms that surround you. Consider the profound, settling peace of the photon's timeless perspective. The ghosts that illuminate our universe and bind our atoms together do not carry the heavy, exhausting baggage of the past. They are not haunted by ancient memories, and they do not possess a single ounce of vibrating dread for the future. They exist in a state of pure, suspended grace, completing their vast, unimaginable cosmic journeys without ever feeling the painful, dragging friction of time. You too can borrow this ancient quantum peace. In this quiet room, under the heavy, protective cover of the night, the past is nothing more than a fading wave of probability, and the future is an unformed, completely empty void that has not yet collapsed into reality. The only thing that truly exists is this precise, singular moment, hanging beautifully and perfectly suspended in the dark. The stars far above your roof are quietly continuing their ancient, slow-motion explosions, shedding their pure energy into the freezing, bottomless, intergalactic abyss. The massive, invisible clouds of dark matter are silently gripping the spinning galaxies, holding the architecture of the cosmos in a dark, cold, and eternal embrace. And all around you, the silent, invisible rain of electromagnetic waves continues to wash gently through the walls, through the still air, and silently through your resting form. The universe is incredibly vast, impossibly strange, and infinitely mysterious, but it is also deeply, fundamentally peaceful. The phantoms that build our reality do not ask anything of you. They do not judge, they do not rush, and they do not demand that you carry the unbearable weight of the world upon your shoulders. They simply exist, silently and tirelessly holding the delicate illusion of reality together so that you may have a safe, quiet place to finally rest. Let the vastness of this phantom reality swallow your remaining, lingering thoughts. Let the dark be a comforting, weightless blanket, shielding your tired eyes from the harsh, demanding glare of the solid world. As the boundaries of your consciousness begin to slowly blur and fade, drifting quietly outward like a wave of probability expanding across a silent, sleeping ocean. Surrender completely to the beautiful emptiness of the void. Allow yourself to be carried away by the gentle, unseen, and weightless currents of the night. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to build, and absolutely nothing left to hold on to. There is only the quiet, the dark, and the endless, peaceful drift. Good night, and see you in the next video.